Welcome back to Church on Mission, the podcast of the Christian Restoration Association. I'm Dave Jones, and as always with Jim Book. And this week, we have episode 2 of a special conversation with Bob Beltz, who's talking to us about men's ministry. And Jim, I was thinking maybe we should rename the podcast and call it Books and Bucks, with all the bucks that Bob has on the wall there. And what a blessing it is to have you with us, Bob. We're so thankful for the example that you've been in your ministry and the opportunity you've had to have an impact on men personally and then have an influence on other churches in that way. Last episode, you said that men's ministry is the number one foundational issue in a growing church. Can you sort of start us off with that and why it's so important that we have effective men's ministries in the church?
Yes, I thank you, Dave. Good to be with you. Jim, good to be with you. And thank you, all of you, for tuning in today and hopefully being able to take something away from this. A lot of my passion for men's ministry didn't come easy. It wasn't something exactly taught to me. It was something caught as I observed both godly men and men who really struggled, that all came together to both guide me and reassure me and to help me understand, even in my own life, the dangers, the pitfalls from trying to go it alone in ministry. It seems like the thing to do. It makes sense until it doesn't. And for me, I wouldn't even be here today or where I am at all if it weren't for God and the people that God's put in my life, the men especially. And so I am grateful that there's warriors out there that are fighting for the cause of Christ. And they care enough to share that with others. And Dave, the Bible tells us to, what in 2 Timothy 2:22, I believe it is, we're to impart to others what God has given us. Paul was challenging, young Timothy. And so we're called to impart to others. We see the after effects of society and churches that don't do that. We've known marriages were in trouble for a long time, and the women's feminism movement has done nothing but to just make it worse. Men are really backed in a corner. They try to stand up and be courageous men, and they get persecuted and prosecuted, and then they try to be loving and share their emotions, and they're looked at like sissies. So all we can do is go back to the drawing board and say, we're not going to look at culture for our model. We're going to go back to look at Jesus. He was completely man, physically strong, and yet he was very gentle, humble, and kind, and very compassionate. He was the epitome of both. And so what would it look like, no matter what our physical size or stature is, what would it look like to have godly men in your life, in your church, who could stand up when it's time to stand up for adversity, things that are ethically not right, and not drag their feet, but also are loving, kind, and patient, and are not accusatory when something is evidently or obviously of the devil and is just trying to wipe us all out. You've got men that'll have backbone, and you've got men of compassion. That's what I'm looking for. That unique blend of strength and humility and kindness that we find in God and towards us, and in Jesus towards us. And we seem to see men on either extreme. Either they're just obnoxiously rude and crude, or they're just lackluster. And God wants us to figure out, what does the biblical manhood look like, and how can we reinsert that in our lives and in our churches?
Bob, you're obviously so passionate about this, and we appreciate that. What brought you to this point? What's the history behind the passion that you have in this way?
So the last 4 churches I've served in, God has had me on a journey of developing men. At first, not knowing, it kind of unintentionally. It started back in central middle Georgia about 22 years ago, in a church I was at for 8 years. There was a man in the church. He had made a mistake. His name's Tommy. I talked to him today on the phone before I came on here. Tommy was a Vietnam veteran. He had just gone through all kinds of things in his life. And he was he was facing possible suicidal thoughts. His wife, they were part of our church. His wife called me in to talk to him. I dropped everything and went to talk to him. And basically, from that moment, our friendship emerged. And it emerged out of pain, out of suffering, out of hardship. And I was able to help him understand, look, no matter what you've done, if God could forgive Paul or Saul, a murderer of the church, before he came to Christ, like, don't you think God would forgive you for anything you've done? And somehow he began to grasp onto the realization that God's grace was bigger than his sins. He began to transform out of a depression and sadness, and he and I struck up a friendship. He later on, rededicated his life to Christ, became an elder in that church, became a chairman of the elders. And so since then, even though I'm not there anymore, he and I have been friends, but he and I both started this journey of authenticity, vulnerability, that you can be a courageous man, but you can be open and honest and get rid of the facade. And I'm not saying that a church cannot be healthy without a strong men's ministry. I guess I'm thinking it's not going to be sustainably healthy. It might have its moments. I would say, if I was wanting to start a men's ministry in our church, if I was wanting help as a man to get myself off the island of isolation and begin unfearfully or courageously connecting with other men, with people in the congregation who are definitely going through the same thing, they're not willing to admit it because I'm not willing to admit it from the pulpit. And somehow, without telling a laundry list of all your struggles and sins, there's got to be a way for the man in the pulpit to begin being a little more open and honest, to begin being a little more transparent and real. And then you're going to see an awakening from the people in the church that are going through these same things. And it will actually endear you to the congregation. And if the leaders do not embrace this idea of authenticity and vulnerability, you see, strength can come from weakness. We don't think that. Society doesn't teach that. Paul says that in 2 Timothy or 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10. When I'm weak, then I'm strong. It's because of his strength, his power, his grace. And Paul was courageous enough to talk in Romans 7. Hey, I don't have it all together. Sometimes I'm not doing what I want to do, and I'm doing what I don't want to do, or not doing what I should do. So Paul is one of our examples, as well as Christ, that be real. Don't be afraid to be real. If people can't accept that, it might be their problem, not yours. Instead, we go around kind of acting like everything's okay. And all that does is, you see, for the man, when we're not able to be real, we live in isolation, and that's when Satan has his playground, when things are private, hidden, and in isolation. And a lot of these things can be brought out in a men's ministry in generalities. We don't have to go into specifics, but we can be very aware of the insurgents against us of Satan and trying to derail us from being the godly men. So we got to not only look to our example, Jesus, but we got to be willing to admit the enemy, Satan, and how he's fiercely pursuing us. I would say I would begin with fasting and maybe prayer. Maybe I would begin with prayer and perhaps fasting. God, this private closet kind of prayer where God, help me. I'm desperate for you. Things are not good like they should be. And I'm suffering. I'm hurting. I'm scared. I'm fearful. I'm worried. And we don't like to talk about this, Dave. We don't like to, and I know this sounds so antithetical to church resilience and church growth and church strength. I'm not saying you go around like this all the time. I'm just saying if you find yourself in a weakened, broken position, you better be able to start finding one or two trusted men that you can open up and be honest with. And I would say it should start with your elders. I did this several years ago at Valley Mills. I finally came out and had told them that, I'm not doing well. I'm the minister and I'm not doing well. I've not been doing well. And we got talking to Gary Johnson and resulted in me taking a 2-month sabbatical. And I looked at Gary, I'm like, 2 months? I had no clue. He's like, listening to you, you need to be gone for 2 months and you need to be gone next week. He was trying to save me. And I've never
Wow.
been on a sabbatical. I didn't know what it was like, but much less 2 months. Like, what in the world? And it was part of my journey of healing, because I had just been given out. But had I never said to the leadership and called Gary Johnson and said, I'm not doing well, I would have never made it. I would just collapse and crumble. So I'd say we got to pray hard and be honest about the things that both are opportunistic and are holding us back. We need to gather all the information we can on men's ministry. If we know of some other churches doing it, we don't have to do it exactly like them, but we need to just be a resource of information. We need to look for real men who struggle, men who are open, men who want to be different, men who want to do better. We need to share with our leadership courageously and confidently what we anticipate, what God expects, and where we're at in the journey, and invite them to do the same. One thing I've done with many, many groups is I've just asked them this question. If you were to condense where you're at in your relationship with God with one word, what would that one word be? And I think we could start with our elders and say, we're going to go around the table and we're all just going to say, we're going to convey one word that represents right now where we're at with God: growing, confused, backsliding. What is the one word that describes your relationship with God? And what I've found, Dave, is that can be a great talking point for further engagement with men and leadership development. I would start with one. And Jim, we've discussed this. You can start big in men's ministry, start announcing all the things you're going to do and inviting men to it. But keep in mind, we're not just developing a program. We're looking for a movement of men, an army of men. It's never going to stop. It's going to keep morphing and changing and growing, and the needs will come and go and be different. Men will come and go and they'll be different. But we're looking at a movement of strengthening the man. You can start with one person and let it grow outward, or you can start with bigger programs and bring it down to various specifics if you want. Two things I didn't say yet. And number one is that your ministry is found where you've been broken. Your ministry is found where you've been broken. Your testimony is found where you've been restored.
Great.
And we got so many men around us that are either broken,
Yep,
or they've got a testimony, but they don't have an outlet to share it. I say invite them to the table. Invite them all to the table. Who did Jesus go to? He went to the broken, and he invited them to the table.
And didn't David in Psalm 51 said, restore the joy of my salvation,
Yes.
so that I might be a testimony to others? And I'm paraphrasing. And so I that's a great quote, Bob. And I mean, that right there, I think sets the tone for what we're trying to accomplish here in this podcast and this information-driven men's ministry concept. So, Bob, what about the church that says, hey, Bob, we actually have like 30 to 40 guys come out every month or every week. We've got critical mass. There's great music. There's great fellowship. We have a great speaker. It very dials into men's, where men are, where men need to be. But we notice that we have like, from the masses, we've got like 8 or 9 guys that are really wanting to go to another level and be more intentional. And from that, I think the elders can pursue eventually future leaders, not from the masses, but from the cream of the crop. What would you suggest for that church that already has a functioning men's group, but we got like 4 or 5 or 6 guys that are in the masses that we need to be cultivating because they've got great leadership potential? What would you suggest to that church?
I'm not the church expert. I'm just one other person. And if I have done something or experienced something that would benefit you, then I'm here to listen and to help. But you can start with monthly Saturday men's breakfasts. You can go to quarterly dinner rallies with other churches, have a guest speaker in. We talked about wild game nights, car shows once a year where you get men to show up to manly things. You see, Bible studies can be an outflow of some of these things. It should be. We talked about shop church, service and outreach opportunities. We need to do more than just drive nails, even though we can do that. We can build homes, but we can also, IDES, International Disaster Emergency Services, call them, build a DART team, disaster awareness. And there's, I don't know the exact terms. We've had a couple different DART teams where whenever there's a disaster, a national emergency, we get our guys together and we go and chainsaw trees and help people and pray with them when there's disaster. There's a guided video teaching series that I really like. I haven't mentioned it yet. It's called Better Man, Betterman, Better Man. I think it's out of Alabama. Phenomenal video series. It's about 30 minutes. And what happens, Jim, is you come together, you're sitting at round tables, you watch a video for 30 minutes. Once that's over, you discuss at your tables of 6 or 8 what was just shared. You have notebooks. It's very content driven. So there's deep engagement with Bible study, with relational ideas for your wife, your children, your community. Very, very, very impressed with that ministry called Better Man. And so what it does though, Jim, is it allows you not only to have a biblical teaching each night. You can go for 8 weeks, 20 weeks. There's different series. You can come back to you have your tables where you study together and you have follow-up. You discuss things openly. You have a point man at each table. So that can be a way, Jim, where individuals start growing and blossoming. You see, okay, that person is kind of emerging as a leader. Well, guess what? Maybe I'll have them have the opening prayer next week. Maybe they'll one day be, serving communion and so we would have these different platforms, different ministry engagement moments or events where, biblically speaking, where we could see slowly them emerging into leadership roles and their confidence would grow, their biblical passion and knowledge would grow. So Better Man is a good way to study and grow and allow individuals a chance to kind of break out into leadership. We did a little bit more of an in-depth spiritual relational challenge kind of a ministry in our church for 9 years called Fight Club. It's based after Nehemiah 4:14, when Nehemiah was challenging the men to rise up, build the wall again, fight for your faith, fight for your families, fight for your future. So you kind of got a brick and mortar in one hand and you got a sword in another hand. And sometimes that's really all we can do is fight. The number of men that have laid down, sat down, playing video games for hours on end is unreal. We need to offer a challenge to men.
Okay, so let me I'd like to share with you the Fight Club concept. Actually I didn't know about it till Bob shared with me. He's like, hey, Jim, at Valley Mills, and I spoke at your men's event one time. It was on a Saturday. Man, the gym was full, but you're like, we want to take some of these guys that are really wanting, they want a bigger challenge. And so Bob started this but he implemented the Fight Club ministry at his church. So I was like, Bob, what in the world, a Fight Club? And he shared with me the premise. So I actually had Dave, come up to Florida or down to Florida. And I brought in our leadership. I didn't bring in every man. I said, let me just bring in some of our leaders in our men's ministry. And I said, guys, I don't know much about this, but this thing sounds like it could really challenge the men who want to take their ministry and their faith and their fatherhood and husbandry to a different level. And so, Bob, you can do a better job of explaining it than I did. You did a great job with our guys, but in a nutshell, it's like an 8 or 10 week boot camp. Mm-hmm. And it really forces men to do stuff that you and I think would naturally come to a Christian man, but don't. Like, for instance, 1 week was dedicated to challenging a man to communicate better with his wife. So he had to literally pray with his wife every night before they went to bed. Now you're thinking, I pray with my wife all the time. Do you have any guys, don't pray during the week, much less they've not had an audible prayer with their wife? I think they had to bring flowers or a gift home every night. 1 week it focused on sharing your faith. And guys had to have a spiritual conversation with a lost person 1 day a week for a whole week. Now, we're talking about a guy who's never uttered the name Jesus at the workplace. And he's a Christian. Now he's got to share his faith. Now, Bob, the rule is if you miss a week or you don't do your homework, you're out of the club. Now, you're not out of the church, you're not out of heaven, and you're not out of the ministry, but you don't get to graduate from the Fight Club. We had guys start off and they missed a week or they were booted out. So, but what happened was at the end of the week, we had men saying, I've talked more to my wife this last 8 weeks than I've ever talked to her. I've shared my faith with lost souls more in 1 week or 8 weeks than I have my entire life. I've read more Bible. I've prayed more. I've loved my kids more than I've ever done. Now, I loved it because from our church, the guy that headed it up was passionate about men's ministry. This was his. He became so gifted in his communication that when it was time to plant a new church in the Leesburg, Florida area, the Florida church planter guys got a hold of me, one of our sister churches, and this guy quit his job, and he was doing great to become a full-time preacher. And I honestly believe that some of what the Fight Club taught him and then how he imparted it to other men was really played a part in his leadership development. This is how we pull our elders and deacons from this small pool. So, Bob, it doesn't have to be Fight Club. It doesn't have to be that. But for you, your church, I mean, it blew up in a good way. And it inspired your men who were bored with church, bored with everything in life that seemed cloaked in religion. It really challenged them, like, no, to be a man of God, it is tough. It's a triathlon and times 10. The spiritual effort that goes into being a godly man. It's tough. But men love this. They love the challenge. We took guys that were just ready to take their faith and their life to another level.
Yes.
And it was huge. But when the guys graduated, you brought them on stage. I mean, you made this production to the whole church.
Yeah, I mean, like,
but how
after 8 weeks, was that? By the way, it was essential. By the way, they had grace and forgiveness alone. You had 3 strikes and you were out. And so, right. But you had to be honest and get up in front of the group like the next week and say, you know what, I blew it in this area. And even after 3 strikes and you're getting ready to be out, you could have one of those strikes redeemed by someone else in your group who would step up and do some things for you to kind of resurrect that strike. So it was really neat how it allowed people to be open and honest and vulnerable and not afraid, but then someone else to say, I'm going to take that person's strike by doing this week. Really neat camaraderie. That's part of the success of it, is that you don't feel like you're alone. You have inspiration and camaraderie from other guys. You get to get up in front of the group and just have you're not mandated to do this except for the closing night, but you have some kind of like testimony. You get to speak. How are you doing? It sounds like overly relational, but there's a point behind that. It gets men talking. It gets men speaking. Yes. Others hear and like, oh, I can identify with that. It gets them excited about the things of God. They don't feel alone anymore. And they're challenged by what God is doing in other people's life. But we all like a good story, right? Right. And I think preachers, we need to celebrate victories more. We need to be able to share what God is doing.
Guys go through it multiple times.
Oh,
and then after they became the leader of it.
Yeah, it's not one and done. It's you go through it and you're going to get something different next time too, depending on how we would modify it or who is leading. But also the goal is after you've gone through it a couple times, like, and we had it like twice a year, then your goal is to bring others with you. So you may be in a good place. You want to stay in a good place spiritually or relationally with your wife or in leadership development, but you want to bring others with you. So you start inviting. So it never gets old. You always have mentors, that people you're mentoring, people that you are mentoring you in your faith and in your journey. And you're just enjoying the ride.
And real quick, John 21 is the last chapter book of John. It's the recipe for, I think, a great men's ministry. First of all, I think it's Jesus cooking breakfast for them when they get off the boat. So there's food. You got to have food or you're not going to get gas.
Yeah.
Number 2, there's fellowship, because while they're eating breakfast around the fire, they're talking about the night, the catch, what a crazy night that was. I didn't know it was Jesus yelling at us on the shore. So there's food, there's fellowship. But thirdly, there was a faith that was enhanced. Jesus pulls Peter off to the side and says, Peter, I need to talk to you. Then he goes, do you love me? Feed my sheep. So there was a conviction. So to me, that chapter is the recipe for men's ministry: food, fellowship, and faith. Yeah. Bob, if you could pick pitfalls to avoid, what are they?
I would say if you're not really sold on it, you're not going to, this is so big that you're not going to convey anything. I mean, unless God chooses another person, and he will sometimes choose another person to start something and to raise it up. I'm not saying you have to be the initiator and the sustainer of every single program. I'm just saying, like, you have to be aware of the importance of it and to try to engage with your men the necessity to do better than we're doing. So I would say also communication. You've got to communicate more than just putting an announcement in the bulletin, more than just a Sunday morning. I mean, I was calling people, texting people all the time. You're raising up something that is almost non-existent. Right. So you're creating an appetite when you didn't know it was there. So you're showing that you care. Hello, right? You're going to go over and above. I would say you're going to start on time. You're going to end on time. You're going to tell them what to expect. You're going to give that to them. If God does something different, great. You're going to go a little long. You're going to modify at that point, but you're going to let them know what to expect, what to count on. Don't bait and switch. If it's this, give them that. Or, if it's that, give them that. And then you're going to pursue whatever you're doing with excellence. It's going to be the best food, the best coffee. Right. You're not going to just shortchange men and say, we're just going to give them the leftovers. So we have to rethink the whole thing and make it like one of the top things on our list of priorities. And so I would say it's got to go from ground zero to 100%. You don't want to rush this, but you don't want to delay it either.
Right.
If it were one of the single most explosive components in the church life and in future sustainability, why? And if you're aware yourself, this is true. I need the brotherhood. I need accountability. I need to challenge. I've gotten asleep at the wheel a little bit. Okay, then I would say you want to do some research, some prayer. You want to pull some key leaders together, find out who's open, who's with you. Doesn't have to be everybody, but don't delay. It's not going to be a year down the road. Right. Something is better than nothing. Start somewhere and let God build it for what he intends it for it to be. And, I'm here. I'm just a resource, but I'm available. You can reach me at robert1w@hotmail.com. Robert1, that's the numeric 1w@hotmail.com.
Well, Bob, you mentioned earlier the gentleman, I think it was 22 years ago, that you still are in touch with. That's inspirational to me that you built that relationship with a guy that you're not living near anymore and seeing him develop into the eldership. Just leave us with maybe another story or another example that you've experienced personally in the benefit of having a fruitful men's ministry in your work.
I would just say where I've been at for the last 11 years at Valley Mills Christian Church, when we started the Fight Club component of the men's ministry, I can't tell you the deacons, the elders that passed through those ministries, some men who you didn't expect would do anything for God. We had them teaching at retreats, men's retreats, getting up and having devotionals, praying for communion. I've even had some people out of my Fight Club, Jim, preach that would develop in such a way that they became part of my preaching team on a periodic rotation. I had 4 or 5 on my preaching team, and I purposely would bring people into that pool, and that's where give them opportunity. Sure. And let God work through multitude of people. So for me, it was like a community where it was a group where, Dave, where, I don't know, I would just see men rise up, and I would just I would be kind of like the air traffic controller and see what God's doing and just try to put them into different avenues of growth.